Have you ever felt completely alone? Not just lonely in a room full of people, but fundamentally alone in the universe. Like you're screaming into a void and the only thing that comes back is the echo of your own voice. Is there anyone out there listening? Is there some kind of guide, some kind of help that we just can't see? What if you could just pick up a pen and get a direct message from whatever is on the other side? Would you even dare to try? I did, and it was not what I expected. Number 20. Why would anyone even try this? The concept of channeling dates back to antiquity, with the Oracle of Delphi in ancient Greece being one of the most famous examples, operating for nearly 1,200 years from around 800 BC. The spiritualist movement, which popularized practices like automatic writing in the West, began in 1848 with the Fox sisters in New York. A 2009 study found that about 29% of Americans believe in astrology, and a similar percentage believe they have been in contact with a ghost. The desire to connect with the unseen is not a fringe idea, it's a deeply human one. It started with a feeling of being stuck, not in a dramatic, life is over way, more like being in a car with the wheels spinning in mud. I was moving, but I wasn't going anywhere. I had a job, I had a place to live, I had friends. But there was a low-grade hum of dissatisfaction under everything, a sense that I was missing something important. I read books on self-help, I listened to podcasts about finding your purpose. They all said similar things. Look inside, meditate, journal, find your passion. I tried, I really did. I sat in silence until my legs fell asleep. I wrote pages and pages in a journal about my feelings. The result was just more of my own thoughts, spinning in the same old circles. My brain felt like a closed loop. My thoughts were talking to my feelings, which were influencing my thoughts, and around it went. I wasn't getting any new information. I was just rearranging the old, tired furniture in my head. And then I stumbled across the idea of spirit guides. The concept wasn't new to me. I'd heard it in New Age shops and seen it on TV shows. It always seemed a bit, out there. The idea is that we all have non-physical beings assigned to us. Guides, angels, whatever you want to call them. They're here to help, to offer perspective, but they can't interfere unless you ask. The idea was intriguing. It offered a way out of my closed loop. It suggested there was a source of information outside of my own head. But how do you ask? How do you have a conversation with something you can't see or hear? That's when I found automatic writing. The method was simple. You get a pen and paper. You quiet your mind, you ask a question, and then you just let your hand move. You don't think. You don't direct, you just let it write. The theory is that your guide can use your hand to communicate. It bypasses the conscious, critical mind. It's like a direct line. I was deeply skeptical. My rational brain screamed that it was nonsense. It's just your subconscious. It's the ideomotor effect, where your muscles move without you consciously deciding to move them. It's wishful thinking. I agreed with all of that, but a small part of me, the part that was tired of spinning its wheels, asked a different question. What if it's not nonsense? What if it actually works? The potential upside seemed huge. The downside, I'd waste a few sheets of paper and feel a little silly. It seemed like a fair trade. So I decided to try it. I had nothing to lose but my own skepticism. Number 19, what's the difference between this and just writing? Psychiatrist Carl Jung used a form of automatic writing he called active imaginations to explore the unconscious, leading to his seminal work, The Red Book, which took him 16 years to create. The surrealist movement of the 1920s, led by Andre Breton, heavily employed automatic writing to tap into what they called the surreal, the space beyond reality. They believed it was a way to free art from the confines of rational thought. A study on glossolalia, or speaking in tongues, used brain imaging and found that the frontal lobes, the area associated with language and control, were less active during the practice, suggesting the person was not in conscious control of what they were saying. This is similar to the state people tried to achieve in automatic writing. The first hurdle was figuring out the how. The internet is full of guides, and they all have slightly different rules. Some said you had to use your non-dominant hand. Some said you had to light a candle and say a prayer for protection. Others said to just sit down and do it, no ceremony required. It was confusing. It felt like trying to learn the rules to a game that nobody had ever written down completely. And I decided to keep it simple. No candles, no incense, no chanting. Just me, a cheap spiral notebook, and a ballpoint pen that I knew wrote smoothly. The last thing I wanted was for the pen to catch on the paper and break whatever fragile connection I was trying to make. The core difference between this and journaling seemed to be intent. With journaling, I was actively thinking. I was trying to analyze my day, understand my feelings, solve my problems. I was in the driver's seat. With automatic writing, the goal was to get out of the driver's seat. The goal was to become the passenger, or maybe even just the car itself. To let something else do the steering. This was harder than it sounded. How do you turn off your brain? The moment I tried not to think, my mind flooded with thoughts. Did I remember to send that email? What should I have for dinner? Is this pen comfortable enough? My inner monologue was a non-stop chatterbox. I read that a light meditative state was helpful, so I tried that. I closed my eyes. I focused on my breath. Inhale, exhale. I tried to just observe my thoughts without getting attached to them, letting them float by like clouds. And I did this for about 10 minutes. I felt a little calmer, a little more centered. My brain was quieter, but it wasn't silent. The chatter had gone from a shout to a whisper, but it was still there. I decided it was good enough. Perfection was the enemy of progress, or so they say. I opened my eyes. I picked up the pen. I placed the tip on the blank page. The paper was so white, so empty. It was waiting. I felt a weird mix of stage fright and absurdity. Here I was, a grown adult, about to try and get a ghost to write me a letter. If anyone walked in, they'd think I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had, but I'd come this far. I had to see it through. Number 18, how do you start a conversation with nothing? The practice of bibliomancy, seeking guidance by opening a book to a random page, has been around for centuries, used with texts from the Bible to the works of Virgil. It operates on a similar principle of seeking external wisdom through a semi-random process. The Ouija board, patented in 1890, works on the same ideomotor principle as automatic writing, where subconscious muscle movements guide the planchette. Before its patent as a toy, it was a serious tool used by spiritualists. The term channeling itself only became popular in the 1970s, but the practice is ancient, appearing in shamanic traditions across the globe. The blank page stared back at me. Now what? I needed a question. It felt like making the first phone call to someone you've never met. What's the right opening line? Hello? Is anyone there? Seemed a bit on the nose. I wanted to ask something big, something meaningful. What is my life's purpose? But that felt too big, too much pressure for a first conversation. It was like asking someone to marry you on a first date. I settled on something simple and open-ended. I wrote it at the top of the page. Who is here with me? And then I waited. I held the pen loosely, as instructed. I tried to keep my mind blank, focused only on a feeling of openness, of invitation. My hand rested on the paper. Nothing happened. 1 minute passed, then 2. My hand started to cramp. My arm felt stiff. The skeptical voice in my head got louder. See? Nothing. You're just sitting here holding a pen. You look ridiculous. I took a deep breath and tried again. I relaxed my grip. I shook out my wrist. I closed my eyes for a moment and refocused. I am open to communication. I am ready to listen. I said the words in my head. My hand twitched. It was just a small muscle spasm, I told myself, but then it moved again. A tiny jerky motion. It felt less like I was moving it and more like it was being moved. It was a strange disconnected sensation. The pen drew a small, shaky loop on the page. It looked like a lowercase e that had had too much coffee. My heart started beating faster. Was this it? Was it happening? I tried to stay calm, to stay out of the way. The pen moved again, this time a longer, sweeping line that went off the side of the page. Then another loop, and another. It was just scribbling. It looked like a toddler's drawing. There were no words, no letters, just a series of interconnected loops and jagged lines. It was a mess. After about 5 minutes of this, it just stopped. My hand felt still. The energy, if that's what it was gone. I looked down at the page. It was a chaotic scribble. It meant nothing. Disappointment washed over me. This was what I'd been waiting for. A bunch of squiggles. The skeptic in my head was having a field day. I told you so, it sneered. It's just your hand spasming? I almost gave up right there. I almost closed the notebook and put it in a drawer, chalking the whole thing up to a silly experiment. But then I looked closer at the loops. There was a certain rhythm to them. They weren't completely random. And in the middle of it all, I thought I could see something. A shape. It looked vaguely like a bird. Or maybe a flower. Or maybe it was just a scribble and I was seeing patterns where there were none. Like looking at clouds, I decided not to judge it. The instructions I read said the first few times could be like this. You know, it was like tuning a radio, you get a lot of static before you find a clear station. This was the static I decided I would try again the next day. Number 17, was it just my own mind playing tricks? The ideomotor effect is a psychological phenomenon where a subject makes motions unconsciously. The scientist William Benjamin Carpenter coined the term in 1852 to explain how devices like dowsing rods and Ouija boards worked. Michael Faraday, a prominent scientist, conducted an experiment in 1853 to prove that table turning, a popular seance practice, was caused by the unconscious muscle movements of the participants, not spirits. Our brains are pattern recognition machines. This is called apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. It's why we see faces in toast or animals in clouds. The next day, I approached the notebook with less expectation. The pressure was off. I'd already failed once, so the second attempt felt easier. I did my little breathing exercise, I quieted my mind as best I could, I picked up the pen. This time, I didn't ask a big question, I just wrote a simple greeting at the top of the page. Hello. I held the pen, relaxed, and waited. For a minute, nothing. Then, that same strange, disconnected feeling started in my hand. It was like a faint electrical current. The pen started to move. Again, it was loops. Big, slow, looping circles over and over again. It was almost hypnotic. I just watched my hand move across the page, filling it with circles. It was more controlled than the day before. Less jerky. I just let it happen. I didn't try to force it to write words. I figured, if this is a process, I have to trust the process. Maybe this is how it starts. Maybe you have to learn to crawl before you can walk. My hand was learning to move in this new way. After a few pages of loops, I felt a shift. The loops started to get smaller, tighter. They started to look more like cursive letters. Anal, an-o, another o. The pen was trying to write. I could feel it. I tried my best to stay out of it, to just be an observer. Then, a word emerged. Like it was messy, like the letters were poorly formed and slanted, but it was definitely a word. Love. That was it, just that one word, written in the middle of a page of loops. My hand stopped. The energy was gone. I stared at the word, love. It was such a simple, powerful word. It wasn't a complex answer to a deep question. It wasn't a prophecy, it was just. And maybe it was. I couldn't prove it wasn't. There was no way to scientifically verify the source of that word. But it didn't feel like it came from me. The sensation of my hand moving on its own was undeniable. It felt external, and the feeling that came with the word was one of profound peace. It was a warm, comforting feeling. It was the opposite of the anxious, looping thoughts I usually lived with. Even if it was just my subconscious, wasn't that still interesting? Maybe a part of my own mind, a deeper, wiser part, was trying to tell me something. Maybe it was telling me the one thing I needed to hear, that beneath all the worry and the striving, the fundamental answer was love. This was a new thought. I had always treated my subconscious as a messy basement full of fears and forgotten memories. I never considered that it might have wisdom, that it might be a friend, whether it was a spirit guide or my own deep mind, something had communicated, and it had been kind. That was enough for me to want to continue. The door was ajar, so I wanted to see what was on the other side. Number 16, can you get more than one word? Answers. The Seth Material is a collection of writings and recordings created by Jane Roberts starting in 1963. She claimed to channel an entity named Seth who dictated entire books through her, covering topics from metaphysics to the nature of reality. These books became foundational texts in the New Age movement. Similarly, Helen Schucman, a professor of medical psychology at Columbia University, claimed to have transcribed A Course in Miracles from an inner voice she identified as Jesus. The process took her 7 years, from 1965 to 1972, resulting in a 1,333-page text. These examples suggest that the phenomenon can scale from single words to complex, lengthy discourses. I kept practicing. Every day for about 15 minutes, I would sit with my notebook. Some days were like the first day, just scribbles and loops. It felt like the connection was bad, full of static. On those days, I didn't force it. I just let my hand scribble, trusting that it was part of the process. And I learned that trying too hard was the worst thing you could do. The moment I started willing it to write, my own conscious mind took over and the feeling was gone. It required a delicate balance of focus and surrender. Then, on about the 5th day, something changed. I started the session as usual. I asked a simple question: what do I need to know today? My hand began to move. It didn't start with loops, it started writing words. The handwriting was strange. It was a mix of cursive and print, and it slanted sharply to the right. It was not my handwriting. My handwriting is fairly neat, upright print. This looked like the writing of a completely different person. The first sentence appeared on the page. Be still. 2 simple words. I waited. The pen moved again. The noise is not you. The worry is a cloud. Let it pass. I read the words as my own hand wrote them. It was a surreal experience. It was like watching a movie and being the screen at the same time. The thoughts were not originating in my head. They were appearing on the page, and I was reading them for the first time. You try too hard. You push the river. Let it flow. It knows the way. The message continued for about a half a page. It was all in this same vein. It was gentle, metaphorical, and calming. It wasn't giving me lottery numbers or telling me the secrets of the universe. It was giving me simple, practical advice for my state of mind. It was addressing the core problem I had started with the feeling of striving and getting nowhere. When it was done, the pen stopped. I read the page over and over. The skeptic in me was still there, but it was quieter now. It was hard to argue with the physical evidence on the page. The handwriting was different. The sentence structure was different from my own. I tend to write in complex sentences. This was short, direct, and poetic. Could my subconscious really create a different handwriting style? Could it adopt a different voice, a different personality to talk to me? Psychologists would say yes. They'd call it a dissociative state or a form of self-hypnosis, and maybe they are right. But in that moment, it didn't feel like a clinical diagnosis. It felt like a conversation. I felt seen. I felt understood. The advice was exactly what I needed to hear, but it came in a way that my own conscious mind would never have phrased it. My mind would have said, you need to stop overthinking things. This voice said, the worry is a cloud, let it pass. The effect was completely different. One was a command, the other was an invitation. It was a shift in perspective. It was a new piece of information in my closed loop, and it was helping. Number 15, what happens when the answers get weird? Helene Smith, a famous medium from the late 19th century, produced automatic writing in what she claimed was a Martian language. She wrote out the alphabet and provided translations. Linguists who studied it concluded it was a complex constructed language that simply had the grammatical structure of her native French. The poet W.B. Yeats's wife, Georgie Hyde Lees, began automatic writing in 1917, just days after their wedding. The writings, supposedly from a group of spirits, became the foundation for Yeats's complex mystical system detailed in his book of Vision. The initial writings were so strange and complex that it took him years to decipher and organize them. After a couple of weeks of receiving gentle, supportive messages, I got comfortable. The process became a normal part of my day. I'd have my morning coffee, and then I'd sit down with my notebook for my daily chat. The voice, if I could call it that, was consistently calm and loving. I started to think of it as a friend, a wise mentor, and I started to trust it. Then one day, I asked a different kind of question. I was feeling anxious about a work project. I was worried I was going to fail. So I asked, will this project be a success? I expected an answer like, do not worry about success, focus on the process. That was the usual style. But that's not what I got. The pen started moving, but it was different. The energy felt jagged, almost frantic. The handwriting, which had been consistent for weeks, changed. It became small, cramped, and spiky. The first word was danger. My stomach dropped. This was new. They are not who they seem. The smiles are masks. The foundation is sand. What was this? I was asking about a project, and I was getting a cryptic warning about my colleagues. My mind started racing. Who was it talking about? My boss? My teammate? I felt a jolt of fear and paranoia. The numbers lie. Look behind the curtain. A serpent waits. This was terrifying. It sounded like something out of a cheap thriller. It was so different from the loving, gentle messages I had been receiving. The pen scribbled a strange symbol, a spiral with a dot in the middle, and then stopped. And I stared at the page, my heart pounding. This was not helpful. This was the opposite of helpful. This was stoking my anxiety, not calming it. I felt confused and betrayed. Where was my wise, loving guide? Who was this new paranoid voice? The skeptic in me came roaring back to life. This is your fear talking. You're anxious about the project, so your subconscious is creating this dramatic paranoid fantasy. It's just you projecting your own anxieties onto the page. That made a lot of sense. It was probably the most rational explanation, but the feeling was so strong, so different. The shift in energy was palpable. The experience felt just as real as the previous ones, just with a completely different emotional tone. I didn't know what to believe. Did I tap into something else? A different entity? Or was this just the darker side of my own mind coming out to play? I had read warnings about this. People who said you had to be careful to protect yourself because you didn't know who or what might come through. At the time, I had dismissed it as superstition. Now, I wasn't so sure. The experience shook me. For the next few days, I was scared to pick up the pen. I had opened a door, and for a while, a friendly face had been there to greet me. Now, I was afraid of who might be waiting behind it. The interesting experiment had suddenly taken a dark turn. Number 14, is it possible to talk to more than one guide? The concept of multiple spiritual guides is common in many traditions. In some shamanic practices, a person may have power animals, plant spirits, and ancestral guides, each with a different role and specialty. The medium Esther Hicks claims to channel a group of entities who call themselves Abraham. She describes it not as a single voice, but as a stream of consciousness from a collective. This suggests that the source of channeled information is not always perceived as a single, monolithic personality. After the serpent incident, I put the notebook away for a week. The fear and confusion were too much. The project at work continued, and nothing dramatic happened. No one revealed themselves to be a backstabber. The foundation did not turn to sand. The warning seemed to be completely baseless, which gave more credit to it was just my own anxiety theory. I decided if I was going to do this again, I needed some ground rules. I couldn't just open the line and see who picked up. I read more about it, and a common piece of advice was to be intentional, to state clearly who you want to talk to. So the next time I sat down, I did something different. Before I started, I said out loud, I only wish to connect with a guide of the highest love and light. I am not open to any other communication. It felt incredibly silly to be saying this to an empty room, but I was willing to try anything. I asked a simple question. Is my guide here? The pen started to move. The energy felt calm again. Familiar. The handwriting was the smooth, slanted script I had come to know, always. I felt a wave of relief. Then I got brave. I asked, who was that other voice last week? The pen moved. Fear. Your fear. It is a loud voice. You gave it the pen. This was a fascinating answer. It wasn't blaming an outside entity, it was turning it back on me. It was saying that my own emotional state had influenced the outcome. The channel was picking up whatever I was broadcasting. When I was calm and open, I received a calm and open message. When I was fearful and anxious, I received a fearful and anxious message. This reframed the whole experience for me. Maybe it wasn't about talking to a specific person named Bob the Spirit Guide. Maybe it was more like tuning a radio. My own emotional state was the dial. If I was tuned to the frequency of fear, I got the fear station. If I was tuned to the frequency of love and trust, I got that station. I decided to test this theory. I asked another question. Can you tell me your name? The response was not what I expected. Names are boxes. We are not boxes. That was interesting. It refused to be labeled. Then, something new happened. The handwriting changed slightly. It became a little more fluid, a little more looping. I am one voice. The handwriting changed again. It became more angular, more precise. We are many. And again, back to the original script, one and many. It is the same. Like a river is one river, but it is made of many drops. My mind was reeling. Was I talking to a group, a collective, or was this just a poetic way of saying that the source of this wisdom was vast and couldn't be pinned down? The idea that I wasn't just talking to one single guide was both confusing and liberating. It meant I didn't have to get attached to one personality. It suggested that the source was more like an ocean of consciousness, and I was just dipping my cup into it. What I got depended on where I dipped the cup and what the weather was like that day. It was a much more complex and nuanced picture than I had started with. It was less about a simple phone call and more about learning to navigate a vast, invisible sea. Number 13, what if the advice is actually bad? The Heaven's Gate cult, which ended in a mass suicide in 1997, was led by Marshall Applewhite, who believed he was in communication with extraterrestrials. His channeled messages convinced his followers to end their lives in order to reach a higher level. On a less extreme scale, people have made poor financial decisions or left stable relationships based on advice they believe came from a channeled source. The uncritical acceptance of information, regardless of its origin, carries significant risks. The critical thinking part of the brain is essential for navigating life, and turning it off completely can be dangerous. The idea that my emotional state dictated the tone of the communication was a game changer. It put the responsibility back on me. I couldn't just be a passive recipient. I had to be an active participant in managing my own state of mind before I even picked up the pen. This made the practice feel safer, but it also raised a new question. If the messages are colored by my own feelings, how can I trust them? What if the advice is just a reflection of my own hidden biases or desires? I decided to test it with a real-life problem. I had a friend who was going through a tough time. She was constantly asking for my support, which I was happy to give, but it was starting to drain me. I felt guilty for feeling this way. I was torn between my duty as a friend and my need for self-preservation. My conscious mind was stuck in a loop of guilt and resentment. I sat down with the notebook, I did my calming exercise, and set my intention to connect with a clear, loving perspective. I wrote, "How can I best handle the situation with my friend?" The writing began. The script was calm and steady. A cup cannot pour if it is empty. Your cup is empty. That was a clear image. It resonated with how I was feeling. You think love is endless giving. That is not love. That is draining. Love is a full cup overflowing. Your giving must come from the overflow, not from the cup itself. This was a perspective I hadn't considered. My idea of being a good friend was to give until I had nothing left. This was suggesting a different model. Fill your cup first, rest, find joy. When it is full, it will overflow naturally. That overflow is for others. Do not let them drink from the cup itself. That is for you. The message was clear. I needed to set boundaries. I needed to prioritize my own well-being, not out of selfishness, but so that I would actually have something genuine to give. It gave me permission to do what I knew I needed to do, but felt too guilty to do. It reframed setting boundaries as an act of self-love, which in turn would make me a better, more sustainable friend. Now, was this advice bad? No. It was actually very good, sound, psychological advice. The skeptic would say my subconscious, knowing the psychological stress I was under, simply formulated the advice I needed to hear in a metaphorical package. My deep mind knew the answer and used the guide persona to deliver it in a way I would accept. And to that I thought, so what? Does the source actually matter if the advice is good? If I follow the advice and it leads to a healthier, more balanced life, does it matter if it came from an ancient spirit or from a clever part of my own brain? The result is the same. My life improves. This became my new litmus test. I would treat any advice from the notebook like advice from a friend. I would listen to it, I would consider it, but I wouldn't follow it blindly. I would run it through my own critical thinking and my own intuition. If it felt sound, if it resonated with my deepest sense of what was right and healthy, I would consider it. If it felt weird, paranoid, or destructive, like the serpent message, I would discard it as noise, a product of my own fear. The automatic writing became a tool, not an oracle. It was a source of input, not a set of commands. This distinction was crucial. It kept me in the driver's seat of my own life. Number 12, can it predict the future? Nostradamus, the 16th century French astrologer, wrote his famous prophecies in quatrains using vague and metaphorical language. Skeptics argue that their supposed accuracy comes from modern interpreters retroactively fitting the vague verses to major events. The Oracle of Delphi was famous for its ambiguous prophecies. When King Croesus of Lydia asked if he should attack Persia, the oracle said, "If you cross the river, a great empire will be destroyed." He attacked and was defeated. The empire that was destroyed was his own. The ambiguity ensures the prophecy is always correct in some way. Scientific studies on precognition have consistently failed to produce any replicable, statistically significant results under controlled conditions. After a few months, my curiosity got the better of me. The advice about emotional states and personal growth was great, but the big, flashy question remained. Could this thing predict the future? I felt hesitant to ask. It felt like I was misusing the tool. It was like using a wise philosopher to ask for stock tips, but the temptation was too strong. I decided to start small. I had a job interview the next week for a position I really wanted. It felt like a long shot, but I was hopeful. I sat down with the notebook, calmed my mind, and asked, will I get the job? The pen started to move. I was expecting a yes or a no or maybe some cryptic metaphor. The answer I got was different. You asked the wrong question. That was unexpected. It was like the guide was chiding me. You think the job is the prize? The prize is the experience. The prize is what you learn about yourself in the asking. The outcome is a detail. This was classic guide speak, deflecting the direct question and turning it into a life lesson. It was frustrating. I wanted a simple answer. Focus on being present. Focus on sharing your light. Be you. That is the only task. The rest is not your concern. So, no prediction. It refused to play the fortune teller game. On one hand, I was disappointed. On the other hand, it increased my respect for whatever this source was. A part of my own subconscious trying to impress me might have just given me the eyes I wanted to hear. A fortune cookie would have given me a vague, positive answer. This source was holding a boundary. It was telling me that worrying about the future was not a productive use of my energy. It was consistently steering me back to the present moment, back to my own internal state. I went to the interview the following week. I tried to follow the advice. I didn't focus on trying to get the job. I focused on just being myself, on having an honest conversation. It was one of the most relaxed and confident interviews I'd ever had. A few days later, I got a call. I didn't get the job. My first reaction was a pang of disappointment. The guide was right, I guess. The outcome was a detail, and in this case, the detail sucked. But as I thought about it, I realized the advice had been perfect. If it had told me, no, you won't get the job, I would have gone into the interview with a defeatist attitude and performed poorly. If it had told me, yes, you will get the job, I might have been overconfident and arrogant. By refusing to answer, it forced me to focus on the only thing I could control, my own performance and state of mind. And because of that, I had a great experience and left a positive impression. A month later, the person they did hire quit unexpectedly. The company called me back and offered me the position. They said they had been so impressed with me during the interview that I was their first choice when the job reopened. So, did the guide predict the future? Not directly, but it gave me the exact advice I needed to create the future I wanted. It taught me that focusing on the process, not the outcome, was the most powerful way to move through the world. It was a lesson that was far more valuable than a simple eyes or no. Number 11. Does the handwriting ever look like your own? Graphology, the analysis of handwriting to determine personality traits, is considered a pseudoscience by the mainstream scientific community due to a lack of empirical evidence. However, handwriting is a complex motor skill controlled by the brain, and it is known to change with mood, age, and health conditions. For example, micrographia or abnormally small handwriting is an early symptom of Parkinson's disease. The fact that handwriting can change based on neurological and psychological states suggests that a shift in conscious state, like the one attempted in automatic writing, could plausibly produce a change in script. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for me was the handwriting. It was so consistently not mine. The slanted, loopy, half-cursive script was like a signature of the guide's presence. It was a tangible, physical manifestation of the otherness of the experience. But one day, something different happened. But I was feeling stressed and scattered. I hadn't slept well, my mind was racing, and I couldn't seem to calm it down. I thought maybe a session of automatic writing would help center me. I sat down and asked my usual opening question. What do I need to know today? The pen moved, but it felt heavy, sluggish. The writing that appeared on the page was a messy, slightly slanted version of my own print. It wasn't the guide's script. The message was also different. It wasn't calm and metaphorical. It was anxious and circular, just like my own thoughts. I can't do this, it's too much, everything is falling apart, what if I fail? I need to work harder, but I'm so tired, maybe I should just quit, everything is a mess. It was one long, unpunctuated run-on sentence. It was a perfect transcription of the anxiety buzzing in my brain. There was no wisdom here, there was no higher perspective, it was just me. It was my own conscious mind, my monkey mind, that had grabbed the pen. The difference was stark and immediate. The feeling was different. The handwriting was different. The content was different. This was an incredibly valuable experience. It was like a control group in a scientific experiment. I now had a clear baseline for what it looked and felt like when it was just me. And it was nothing like the other sessions. This taught me that my state of mind wasn't just a filter that colored the message, it was the key that opened the door. If I was too stressed, too anxious, too in my head, the door to that other consciousness remained closed. I couldn't force my way through. All I could access was the static of my own noisy mind. It made me realize how important the preparation was. The 10 minutes of deep breathing I did before each session wasn't just a silly ritual. It was essential. It was the process of quieting my own thoughts enough for another voice to be heard. It was like waiting for a room full of people to stop talking so you can hear the person whispering in the corner. From then on, if I sat down and my own handwriting appeared, I would just stop. I wouldn't try to force it. I would recognize that I wasn't in the right state of mind. I would put the pen down and maybe go for a walk or listen to some music. I learned that sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is recognize that you're not ready, and to give yourself the grace to try again later. It was another lesson in not pushing the river. Number 10, could you do it for other people? Professional psychic mediums often claim to channel messages for clients from deceased loved ones or spirit guides. Controlled scientific experiments testing the accuracy of psychics, such as those conducted by the Society for Psychical Research, have generally found their results to be no better than chance. Techniques like cold reading, making high probability guesses, and adjusting based on the subject's reactions, and hot reading, using information secretly obtained beforehand, can create the illusion of paranormal ability. This suggests that the perceived accuracy of a reading can often be attributed to psychology rather than psychic phenomena. The thought inevitably occurred to me, if I can get advice for myself, could I get it for others? A friend of mine was struggling with a career choice, and she knew about my little experiment. She was curious and asked if I would try asking a question for her. I was very hesitant. This felt like a sacred personal practice. Using it for someone else felt like a performance. It also felt like a huge responsibility. What if I got another serpent message? What if the advice was bad? But she was insistent and open-minded, so I agreed to try, with a lot of disclaimers. I told her I couldn't guarantee anything, and that she should take whatever came through with a huge grain of salt. The process felt completely different. When I wrote for myself, I was connected to the question, and I had a personal stake in it. For her, I was just a conduit. I sat down with my notebook, but instead of focusing on my own question, I held her in my mind. I thought about her situation and her question. Should I take the new job offer or stay where I am? I set my intention for a clear and helpful message for my friend. The pen started to move. The familiar slanted script appeared. One path is a mountain, the other is a valley. Both lead to the sea. Okay, classic cryptic metaphor. The mountain has a better view, but the climb is hard. The valley is easier, but the view is limited. Where do you wish to walk? The destination is the same. The journey is the choice. I wrote it down, word for word. It continued in this vein, not telling her what to do, but rather framing the choice in a different way. It was highlighting the trade-offs. One job offered more prestige and challenged the mountain. The other offered more comfort and security, the valley. It told her that neither was the wrong choice. The right choice depended entirely on what kind of experience she wanted to have right now. I read it back to her over the phone. She was silent for a moment, then she said, "Wow, that actually helps a lot." She said she had been agonizing over which was the right path, as if one would lead to happiness and the other to ruin. This message gave her permission to choose based on what she wanted, not what she thought she should want. It took the pressure off. From a skeptical point of view, this is easily explained. I knew my friend. I knew the details of her situation. My subconscious simply processed all the information I had about her and the two jobs and created a helpful metaphor to summarize the choice. I was basically a very poetic guidance counselor. I didn't access some universal truth about her destiny, and I just accessed my own deep understanding of her dilemma. And that was fine with me. I told her as much. I said, "This might just be my brain's way of looking at your problem." She didn't care. The advice was helpful, and that's all that mattered to her. I only did it a couple more times for close friends. It always followed the same pattern. It never gave direct commands or concrete predictions. It always offered a change in perspective, a metaphorical reframing of the problem. It never told people what to do. It just gave them a different way to look at their own choice. It acted like a compass, not a map. And maybe that's the only kind of guidance that's truly useful. Number 9, what if you just stop? Studies on meditation show that its benefits, such as reduced stress and improved focus, are most pronounced with consistent practice. If a person stops meditating, these benefits tend to fade over time. This use it or lose it principle applies to many skills. If the ability to enter the receptive state required for automatic writing is a skill, it would likely atrophy without regular practice. The connection may not be a permanent state, but rather a mental muscle that requires exercise. After about a year of consistent practice, life got busy. A new project at work, a family issue, a new relationship. My daily routine was disrupted. The quiet 15 minutes I had carved out for my notebook were suddenly filled with other demands. At first, I missed it. I felt a little more disconnected, a little more in my head. But then, the new normal took over. Days turned into weeks, and I realized I hadn't picked up the pen in over a month. I didn't stop because of a bad experience or a loss of faith. I just stopped. Life happened. One afternoon, I found the notebook while cleaning my desk. I flipped through the pages. I saw the early scribbles, the first word love, the gentle advice, the scary serpent warning, the reframing of my friend's career choice. It was a diary of a very strange and profound journey. I felt a pang of guilt. Had I abandoned my guide? Was the connection lost forever? I decided to try. I sat down. I didn't do a long meditation. I just took a few deep breaths. Oh, I was out of practice. I felt rusty. I picked up the pen and asked, "Are you still there?" I waited. For a long time, nothing happened. My hand felt like my own. The magic, it seemed, was gone. I felt a sad, nostalgic feeling, like remembering a friend I had lost touch with. I was about to give up when I felt a faint twitch in my hand. It was weak, hesitant. The pen started to move, slowly. The handwriting was shaky, not the confident script I was used to. It looked like the writing from the first few weeks of practice. The words that appeared were simple. Always here, just quiet. You were not listening. The message was not accusatory. It was a simple statement of fact. The radio hadn't been turned off. I had just walked out of the room. You do not need us every day. You have learned to listen to yourself. That was the point. This hit me hard. I had been thinking of the guide as a source of answers. But this message suggested something different. It suggested the guide was a teacher, and the goal of the teacher was to make the student no longer need them. I looked back over the last few months. In my busy, chaotic life, I had been handling things. And I had been setting boundaries. I had been making decisions from a calmer, more centered place. And I hadn't been consciously thinking about the guide's advice, but I had internalized it. The lessons about filling my own cup, about focusing on the process, about letting the worry clouds pass by, they had become a part of my own operating system. I hadn't needed to pick up the pen because I was learning to find that quiet, wise voice inside myself. The automatic writing had been a set of training wheels. It had helped me to distinguish the signal from the noise in my own head. It had taught me what wisdom felt like. Now I was learning to ride the bike on my own. I still pick up the notebook from time to time when I feel particularly stuck or lost. The connection is still there, though it sometimes takes a little longer to establish. But it's no longer a daily necessity. It's a tool I can use when I need it, but it's not a crutch. The ultimate goal, it seems, was not to become dependent on an outside source, but to discover the guide that was inside me all along. Number 8. How does it change how you see the world? The concept of synchronicity, first introduced by Carl Jung, is the idea of meaningful coincidences. Jung believed these were not random, but were manifestations of an underlying order and a causal connecting principle. A regular practice of trying to connect with a deeper consciousness, as in automatic writing, may make a person more attuned to noticing such synchronicities in their daily life. Their worldview can shift from seeing life as a series of random, chaotic events to seeing it as a meaningful, interconnected pattern. Before this whole experiment, I saw the world as a mostly random place. Things happened. You reacted, you did your best to control your little corner of it, but mostly, you were a victim of circumstance. My inner world was a reflection of that. My thoughts were a chaotic reaction to outside events. The practice of automatic writing changed that. It introduced the idea that there was a source of calm, wisdom, and order that was always accessible, no matter what was happening on the outside. It was like discovering a quiet, soundproof room in the middle of a loud, chaotic party. This changed how I related to my own thoughts. I used to believe that my thoughts were me. If I had an anxious thought, it meant I was an anxious person. If I had a negative thought, I was a negative person. The writing taught me to see my thoughts as weather. They were clouds passing through the sky of my awareness. They weren't the sky itself. I was the sky. The guide's voice was the clear, blue sky, and my anxious thoughts were just temporary storm clouds. This separation was incredibly freeing. It meant I didn't have to believe every thought that popped into my head. It also made me more open. I started noticing more coincidences. I'd be thinking about a friend, and they would call. I'd have a question, and the answer would appear in a book I randomly opened or a conversation I overheard. Skeptics would call this confirmation bias, or the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, and once you're thinking about something, you start seeing it everywhere. And they are probably right, but the subjective experience is what matters. My experience of the world became richer, more magical. It felt less like a random machine and more like a conversation. I felt like I was a part of something, not just a spectator. I also became more compassionate, both with myself and others. The core message I received, over and over, was one of love and acceptance. The guide was never critical or judgmental. Even when I made mistakes, the message was always learn, grow, be gentle with yourself. Applying that logic to myself made it easier to apply it to other people. I started to see that everyone is just struggling with their own noisy thoughts, their own fear clouds. Everyone is doing the best they can with the tools they have. It didn't make my problems go away. I still have bad days, I still get stressed, but my baseline has shifted, my foundation is more solid. I know that beneath the surface level chaos, there is a place of deep peace and wisdom. Whether that place is a spirit guide or the deepest part of my own subconscious, I don't really know. And I've come to realize that I don't need to know. The experience itself is what matters. Number 7, what is the scientific explanation for all this? The default mode network, DMN, is a network of interacting brain regions that is most active when the mind is at rest, not focused on the outside world. It's associated with self-referential thought, daydreaming, and thinking about the past or future. Some researchers speculate that practices like meditation and channeling may involve intentionally altering the activity of the DMN, quieting the self, and allowing other forms of consciousness to emerge. Studies on creativity show that moments often occur when the brain is in a relaxed state, similar to the one cultivated for automatic writing, allowing for novel connections between existing ideas to form in the subconscious. If I had to explain my experience to a neuroscientist, I wouldn't talk about spirit guides. I'd talk about brain states. The most likely scientific explanation is a combination of the ideomotor effect, a light dissociative state, and accessing the vast processing power of the subconscious mind. Let's break that down. The ideomotor effect explains how the hand can move on its own. Tiny unconscious muscle movements driven by our thoughts and expectations create the writing. This is the mechanism. The dissociative state sounds scary, but it's a common experience. It's when you zone out while driving and suddenly realize you're at your exit. Your conscious mind was elsewhere, but a part of your brain was still driving the car. In automatic writing, I was intentionally cultivating a similar state, quieting the conscious me to let another part of my brain take the wheel. The most interesting part is the subconscious mind. We know that the vast majority of our mental processing happens below the level of conscious awareness. Our subconscious is constantly absorbing information, making connections, and solving problems in the background. It's like a supercomputer that's always running. What if automatic writing is simply a way to get a printout from that supercomputer? The HID persona could be a clever trick my subconscious created. It knows I would be more likely to accept advice from a wise external entity than from myself. So it creates a character. It gives it a different handwriting, a different way of speaking. It's a psychological hack. My subconscious creates a wise other to talk to the everyday me. This explains why the advice was so good. It wasn't coming from a random place. It was coming from the deepest part of my own mind, which had been processing all my problems and experiences. Access to far more data than my conscious mind did. It also explains the bot advice. When my conscious mind was filled with fear and anxiety, that fear bled into the subconscious process. The printout was corrupted by the emotional static I was generating. Garbage in, garbage out. This explanation doesn't take away the magic for me, it just relocates it. The magic isn't an external spirit. The magic is the human brain. The idea that my own mind contains a wise, loving, poetic consciousness that I can talk to is in some ways even more profound than the idea of an external guide. It means that the source of wisdom I was searching for wasn't out there at all. It was inside me all along. I just needed to learn how to listen. Number 6, aren't you just talking to yourself? The concept of the bicameral mind, proposed by Julian Jaynes in 1976, theorized that ancient humans did not have introspective consciousness as we do today. Instead, they experienced their own thoughts as auditory hallucinations, which they interpreted as the voices of gods or ancestors. While the theory is not widely accepted, it raises a fascinating question about how the brain can partition itself and create the experience of an other within one's own mind. Modern psychology speaks of internal family systems, where our personality is made up of various parts, and therapy can involve facilitating a dialogue between them. The big nagging question that never fully goes away is the simplest one. Aren't you just talking to yourself? And the simplest answer is yes, of course I am. But the more complex question is, which self? I am not one monolithic thing. The me who is worried about a deadline is not the same as the me who is laughing with a friend. The me who is tired and grumpy is not the same as the me who is feeling creative and inspired. We all contain multitudes. We are all made up of different parts, different voices, different desires. Most of the time, the loudest voice in my head is the ego, the everyday self. It's the part that's concerned with survival, with planning, with worrying. It's the project manager of my life. It's useful, but it's also limited and often anxious. The automatic writing, I believe, is a way to have a conversation with a different self, a deeper self, the self with a capital S, the part of me that is connected to something bigger than my daily worries. You can call it the subconscious, the higher self, the soul, the Atman. The name doesn't matter. So yes, I am talking to myself, but I'm talking to a part of myself that I don't usually have access to. I'm bypassing the project manager and talking directly to the wise, calm CEO who has the big picture in mind. Thinking of it this way removes the whole debate about whether spirits are real or not. It becomes a psychological practice, not a supernatural one. It's a form of active imagination, a dialogue with my own psyche. And this conversation is incredibly healing. The everyday self feels heard and supported by the deeper self. The deeper self gets a chance to offer its wisdom and perspective. The whole system becomes more integrated, more whole. The experience feels external. It feels like talking to someone else. But maybe that's just a necessary illusion. Maybe our brains are wired in such a way that we need to project our own wisdom onto an other in order to truly hear it. We can't accept that we are that wise, so we invent a guide to give the wisdom to us. Ultimately, I've stopped caring about finding the one true explanation. The experience works. It has made my life better. It has made me calmer, kinder, and more self-aware. Whether I'm talking to a ghost, an angel, my subconscious, or a partitioned part of my own brain is an interesting philosophical question. But it's not the most important one. The most important question is this helping? And the answer is a clear and resounding yes. Number 5, could this be considered a form of meditation? Your brain scans of experienced meditators like Tibetan monks show increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area associated with attention and self-awareness, and decreased activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center. While automatic writing focuses on receiving information rather than just observing the mind, it requires a similar initial state of mental quiet and focused attention. Both practices aim to bypass the chattering, monkey mind and access a deeper state of consciousness. They are different paths to the same mountain. I used to think of meditation as a chore. Sitting on a cushion, trying to empty my mind, felt like a battle against my own thoughts. I was constantly distracted, constantly failing. It was frustrating. Automatic writing became my meditation. It gave my restless mind a job to do. Instead of trying to stop thinking, my goal was to listen for a specific, quiet thought. It was a more active and engaging process for me. The state of mind I have to enter to do the writing is deeply meditative. I have to let go of my worries about the day. I have to release my grip on my own thoughts. I have to be present, in the moment, focused on the feeling of the pen on the paper. The writing itself is a form of mindfulness. I'm just observing my hand move, observing the words as they appear without judgment. The effects are similar to what people describe for meditation. After a session, I feel calm. I feel centered. The volume on my anxious thoughts has been turned down. I have a broader perspective on my problems. It's like climbing a small hill and looking down on the town where you live. From that vantage point, the tangled streets and traffic jams make more sense. You can see the whole layout. For people who struggle with traditional sitting meditation, I think practices like this can be a gateway. It's a form of moving meditation like yoga or Tai Chi. It gives the body and the conscious mind something to do, which can make it easier for the deeper mind to relax and open up. It also produces a tangible result. At the end of a meditation session, you have a feeling of peace. At the end of an automatic writing session, you have that feeling, but you also have pages of text. You have a record of the conversation. You can go back and read the advice. This can make the practice feel more concrete and productive, which can be encouraging for people who are skeptical of more passive spiritual practices. It has taught me that there is no one right way to connect with your inner self. Some people find it through silence, some find it through prayer, some find it in nature. I found it through a pen and a cheap notebook. The method is just the vehicle. The destination is what matters. And the destination is that quiet, peaceful center that exists within all of us. Number 4, what are the dangers I didn't expect? Obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, can sometimes manifest in spiritual or religious contexts, a condition known as scrupulosity. Individuals can become obsessed with prayer or ritual, driven by anxiety rather than genuine spiritual feeling. It's possible for a practice like automatic writing to become a compulsive behavior where a person feels they cannot make any decision, no matter how small, without consulting the guide. This can lead to a loss of personal agency and an inability to function in daily life. The most obvious danger I encountered was the fear and paranoia from the serpent message. It showed me how easily this practice could amplify my own negative emotions if I wasn't careful. But as I continued, I became aware of more subtle dangers. One was the danger of dependency. There was a period where I was consulting the notebook for everything. What should I eat for lunch? Should I go to this party? It was tempting to outsource all my decisions to this seemingly wise source. I was starting to lose trust in my own ability to make simple choices. I had to consciously pull back and remind myself that this was a tool for deep questions, not a crutch for daily life. The goal was to become more empowered, not less. Another danger was spiritual ego. When you feel like you have a direct line to a higher wisdom, it can be easy to start feeling special. You can feel like you have answers that other people don't. I caught myself a few times feeling a little smug, a little more enlightened than others. It's a subtle trap. The moment you start thinking you're special, you've completely missed the point. The core message was always about love and unity, not separation and superiority. And I had to constantly check my ego and remind myself to stay humble. The biggest danger, however, was misinterpretation. The messages were often metaphorical. The mountain has a better view, but the climb is hard. This is a helpful metaphor for a career choice, but what if I had interpreted it literally? What if I thought I needed to go climb a mountain? It's easy to see how someone could take a symbolic message, interpret it as a literal command, and make a very strange life decision based on it. This is why my rule of running everything through my own critical mind became so important. The writing was the start of a conversation, not the end. It was a prompt for my own reflection. I couldn't just take the words at face value. I had to sit with them, feel them out, and see how they applied to my life in a practical, grounded way. Without that final step of conscious integration, the practice could become unmoored from reality. It could become a fantasy world that is more interesting but far less useful than the real one. Number 3, why do I still do it? Human beings are narrative creatures. We make sense of the world by telling stories. A 2010 study showed that our brains react to stories as if we are living them, activating not just the language processing parts of the brain, but also sensory and motor regions. Automatic writing can be seen as a form of creating a new narrative for one's life. Instead of being stuck in an old story of anxiety or victimhood, the practice helps to write a new one based on wisdom, compassion, and empowerment. And I don't do it every day anymore, I don't need to. But I still keep the notebook on my desk. I still turn to it when I feel lost in the fog, when the voice of my own anxiety is so loud that I can't hear anything else. And I do it because it works, it cuts through the noise, it offers a perspective that I can't seem to find on my own. It's like having a wise, unconditionally loving friend on call 24/7. I do it because it reminds me of who I am. In the rush of daily life, it's easy to forget. It's easy to get caught up in roles and responsibilities, to identify with my job title or my problems. The writing always brings me back to a simpler, more essential truth. It reminds me that I am not my thoughts, I am not my job, I am not my fears. I am the consciousness that is aware of all those things. I do it because it's a creative act. It's a collaboration between my conscious and subconscious mind. It's a form of poetry, a way of finding the beauty and meaning in the messy reality of being human. Reading back through the notebooks is like reading the story of my own unfolding. The question of what it is has become less and less important to me over time. Is it a spirit? Is it my subconscious? Is it both? Is it neither? I've come to a place of peace with the not knowing. I can hold both possibilities in my mind at the same time. I can live in the mystery of it. What I know for sure is this. I started this journey feeling small, stuck, and alone. And I felt like my head was a prison. This practice, whatever its ultimate nature, gave me a key. It opened a door to a bigger, quieter, wiser space inside myself. It didn't solve all my problems, but it changed my relationship to them. It taught me how to be my own guide, and that has made all the difference. Number 2, what would I tell someone who wants to try? Research into the placebo effect shows that a person's belief and expectation can have a powerful impact on their health and well-being. A sugar pill can relieve pain if the person believes it's a powerful painkiller. If someone approaches automatic writing with a positive, open, and curious mindset, they are more likely to have a positive and beneficial experience regardless of the ultimate mechanism at play. The intention and mindset are powerful tools in shaping subjective reality. If you're thinking of trying this, my advice is simple. Be curious, be patient, and don't take it too seriously. Don't go into it expecting to get winning lottery numbers or the secrets of the universe on your first try. Go into it with the simple intention of opening a dialogue with a deeper part of yourself. Start simple, just a pen, some paper, and a few minutes of quiet. Don't worry about candles or crystals unless that helps you feel relaxed. The only tool you really need is a willingness to listen. Don't be discouraged if you just get scribbles at first. That's normal. Think of it as warming up. Think of it as learning a new language. It takes time. Let your hand do whatever it wants to do. Loops, lines, dots. Just let it move without judgment. When you do get words, don't treat them like commandments from a god. Treat them like suggestions from a friend. Does the advice feel loving? Does it feel empowering? Does it make you feel more expansive or more constricted? Use your own intuition and common sense as the final authority. You are still the one in charge of your life. If you get a scary or negative message, stop. Recognize that it's probably your own fear talking. Don't engage with it. Put the pen down and do something to ground yourself. Go for a walk. Make a cup of tea. Come back to it another day when you're feeling calmer and more centered. Set a clear intention that you only want to connect with a positive and helpful source. Most importantly, be kind to yourself. There's no way to fail at this. Every time you sit down, you are practicing the act of quieting your mind and turning inward. That is a victory in itself, whether you write a profound message or just a page of loops. It's a journey, not a destination, and the person you get to know along the way is the most interesting one of all yourself. Number 1, was it a spirit guide or was it me? In quantum physics, the observer effect states that the act of observing a phenomenon necessarily changes that phenomenon. It's impossible to measure a system without disturbing it. Perhaps consciousness works in a similar way. The act of asking the question, is it a guide or is it me, forces a distinction on something that may be inherently non-dual. Perhaps the very act of reaching out with our own consciousness to a guide is what creates the guide. Perhaps they are two sides of the same coin, inseparable. The answer might not be one or the other, but both and either. After all this time, after all the pages filled, I still don't have a definitive answer to the big question. Was it a spirit guide or was it me? Some days, I am convinced it is an external intelligence. The feeling is so distinct, the wisdom so unlike my own everyday thoughts, that it feels impossible for it to be coming from my own mind. On those days, I feel a sense of wonder and gratitude for this connection to something beyond myself. On other days, I am equally convinced it is my own subconscious. I read about psychology and neuroscience, and the explanation is so neat, so plausible, that it feels foolish to believe in anything else. On those days, I feel a sense of awe for the incredible power and complexity of the human brain. I have come to a place where I no longer feel the need to choose. The truth is, I don't know. And I'm okay with that. What I do know is that by looking for a guide, I found myself. By trying to listen to an external voice, I learned to hear my own. By searching for wisdom out there, I discovered the wisdom that was already inside. Maybe the guide is just a metaphor for that deep inner knowing we all have. Maybe the practice of automatic writing is just a ritual we create to give ourselves permission to access it. We need the theater of it, the pen, the paper, the question, to trick our skeptical conscious minds into getting out of the way. In the end, the source is irrelevant. The results are what matter. The practice brought me a sense of peace I didn't have before. It brought me clarity when I was confused. It brought me comfort when I felt alone. It taught me that I had my own back. So, was it a spirit guide or was it me? Yes.